Steve, I'm going to wait for you to sign on before I announce us officially, but it would appear that people are waiting to be entertained and informed tonight. No questions coming in. These pictures that Steve gave us for the questions panels today are all from the tour that we opened up for our webinar subscribers last weekend. They could come to our garden, Steve's and mine, and they could go to, this is Sue Purcell's garden. That is her clematis, Mrs. Robert Bryden. It's a clematis that is a hybrid between the blue bush clematis and one of the vine clematises. And it just decks itself out. They're light blue flowers. It's a little bit hard to tell in the lighting there. They're light blue flowers and big clusters. It's an impressive beast. Also Lori, who's on, I see her on the participants list today, Lori's garden and Therese's garden were open. And it was a very fun weekend, walking around with people that are interested in gardens and just talking about why that plant is there and how long it took for this plant to get to whatever size is kind of nice. I have a card that I'm just finishing writing here. It's for Gretchen. Gretchen, I don't know if you're here yet. I don't see your name, but there we have an abundance of Labrador violets. They're a purple-leafed violet, one of the natives, and they are very good at filling in dark spaces. And we had dug up a clump of those and some wood poppy for Gretchen. And they were still here at the end of the day because we got so interested in doing something else, we forgot about them. So gardeners like to swap plants back and forth, and impossible not to do that. Things are quite chlorotic. A lot of the trees are chlorotic, as in dark green veins and yellow. And I think we've just had an overgrowth this year. Plants have had so much water, so much good growing time, that they've exhausted the nitrogen in the soil and are moving it from older leaves to younger leaves to use it to best advantage. Not anything we've seen before. Well, there's a question. Anybody else have flying ants in their house? At that point where the ants get to the overpopulated stage in their colony, and they will hatch out new queens and new drones, new males that are winged, and those guys have to come out and fly and mate, and then they take some of the ants with them to someplace else. We used to have that happening regularly in our house. Our last house was we were on a slab, so the ants basically were living under the house. They are here too, living underneath the basement. But we haven't had any come out in the house here. It's rather disturbing when they do. But they aren't trying to hurt anybody, and they just want to get out and get loose and move on. I've been asked how to get rid of ants. We have ants there's probably very few places in this yard that I can dig where I don't disturb one type of ant or another. The ones I don't like to disturb are the fast, vicious ones. There's kind of a medium-sized black ant that they immediately swarm out and come climbing up my arms looking for places to bite. Little brown ants, big black ants, bigger brown ants, just all kinds. And getting rid of them is really something that would take an ecosystem disruption. Some of these colonies of ants probably extend over 100 square feet. And when people say that, well, we put some ant poison down in there, where did you put it? In entrance 1 of 126? How many ants contacted it before the other ants roped it off and said, everybody stay away from here?
You talked once about getting rid of poison ivy vines at a given time of the year. What's the best time to do that?
The absolute best time for the ivy and for us is in the fall, after the leaves fall, when there's less surface area for you to contact. So I wait until it's cool in the fall and the leaves have fallen, and then I start cutting and digging and doing those things that whatever it is that's going to work for that particular area. I've got a neighbor with poison ivy growing up the crabapple in the front yard, And right now the crabapple has no leaves on it because it had scab so badly, as many crabapples have this year. But bright green, lush and wonderful, climbing up through the middle of the crabapple and up 15 feet is a poison ivy vine. And in the fall, probably late October, I'll cut the vine at the bottom in order to cut it off of the stuff on the top so the stuff on the top dies, and dig out the roots at the bottom of the trunk. And I'll do this wearing long sleeves, gloves, and then I take socks, tube socks that are kind of on the worn outside. I cut the toes off and pull them over my hand so that the gap between my glove and my shirt isn't available for poison ivy oils to get on, because that's where I tend to get touched with poison ivy. And I'll work for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll peel the socks off, peel the gloves off if I'm wearing plastic gloves, throw them in the I usually use a sheet, an old bed sheet spread out, and I throw the debris from the poison ivy on that so that I can bundle it all up and put it in a plastic bag and throw it away. One year, maybe 3 years ago, I worked with my friend Sandy on her poison ivy in January because the ground was not frozen. There was nothing really to contact except the wood, which it takes a little bit more work for the oil to get on you like that. So late fall. Stephen, are you there? Yes, you're there.
Yep, I am here.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carol.
You talked about putting something on the stem of the vine after you cut it.
Yes, if you're not going to dig out the roots, cut the vine, cut a section out of the vine so that the top is completely divorced from the bottom, and you've got a clear shot at the cut surface that's going into the ground. And dab on that cut surface some undiluted, straight out of the bottle, not mixed with water, brush killer or poison ivy killer. Brush be gone is one of them. Especially in the fall, that can get absorbed into the root and kill at least part of the root. It might not kill it all, but it does a fairly good job of killing part of the root. The top part you're going to let dry out for a while and take off when it's safe to take it off and you don't come into much contact with it.
Okay, yeah, that's probably a better, because this is a good sized vine up a big tree on the edge of the property. So
yeah,
got to know that digging out.
And I'm anxious to get the poison ivy vine that I've been describing at the neighbor's house out because it's only 2 houses away. And when poison ivy grows up vertically, it tends to flower quite heavily. And there's more fruit. They're little white berries. The birds like to eat the berries. They can eat the berries without any problem. And the birds carry them all around. Stephen can't weed in our garden. We will not let him weed because he's very susceptible to poison ivy. And it's so easy to overlook that there is a poison ivy seedling in front of you out of things that you're pulling out as you're weeding. So yeah, better to do it that way.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Lori is asking, can we go over for the 100th time how to get a soil test?
How to get a
soil test? I'm not sure what MSU is doing anymore. I hadn't.
MSU is doing soil tests. Let's officially start, and we'll make that our first one to talk about.
Okay.
Okay, now Stephen, let's give it a start.
Okay, welcome to Free4All Friday. This is our 16th one. Coming to you from gardenataz.org. I'm Stephen Nicola.
I'm Janet McConovich, and we do celebrate growing. We do cultivate problem solving right here. People ask us questions. We've been doing this for, well, the question and answer kind of stuff we've been doing for 30 years. We gardened professionally for 40 years and then retired from gardening professionally, and now we're gardening just for all of the people that through the years we said, when we get a chance, we'll help you with that. So brother-in-law, neighbor, son, sister, friend. Yeah, I gotta get over Bruna's 7th son. So we have a good time taking questions because it puts us into other gardens, shows us things that are happening in other places and other situations. And we learn a lot that way by looking up answers. Sometimes we get answers from people that we wouldn't have known otherwise, and we can turn those around to you. And that's why we started the Garden A to Z website. So we could put up what we'd already written and keep on moving upward and outward from there.
Yep.
And you go ahead and tell your friends, because however many people want to come, this is our hour on Friday to hear what's going on this week before people get out to work in their garden. You can just use the link on our Fridays page. Okay, back to how to get a soil test. Michigan State University sells soil tests. They are not any longer running the lab that does the soil test. They take the soil test from you and ship it to a lab that does the test. Then they interpret it and put it back to you. And most of it is done online. So if you go online to Michigan State University Extension, Google Michigan State University Extension soil test, and you can order one online, have it shipped to you. Then you put the soil sample into the pouch, mail it off. You'll see that it's being mailed to a lab. And then the lab will report the results to Michigan State. They'll analyze that, recommend your fertilizer, tell you what kinds of things might be going on, and put that up online, send you an email and say, here's your test results. It's a pretty smooth operation. This looks like it's at Supercells also, Steve. This is Japanese wax bell.
Yep.
Curing.
Nancy has a hand raised.
Okay, Nancy.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, Janet. Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
We have a dwarf smoke bush, the Winecraft Black, and we would like to get it to its ultimate 6 feet tall. We have had a couple of the branches shoot up about 2 feet this year. So, but I would also like it to fill out more. So am I right that I should wait until either late winter, early spring to prune those tall branches off so it'll bulk up more?
Is it its second year or third year?
This is its, I think it's the third year.
Okay.
Third year.
Yeah, because probably you're going to need to wait for that third year before you can really see what the growth is going to be. And smoke bushes are smoke trees, smoke bush, same thing. They are notorious for suckering awfully when you cut them. So you want to be careful when you cut them that you're cutting what you really want to cut. If you're just going to pollard them, cut them down and let them come back up again as sprouts like we do when we're keeping a full-size smoke bush small, it doesn't matter. But if you want it to be a nice tree, then you need to try to break off pieces that are coming up while they're still green, where you're not leaving a stub, but where you can rub out with ones that you don't need. And you're less likely then to get numerous suckers coming back up. But if it's in the third year, this year would be the year that it starts showing you what it can do. And next year it will probably give you a number of more straight branches and you can choose from them. So if either of those couple branches that it has right now seem to you to be well placed, then you can leave them. If they aren't, try to get them off before the bark forms.
Okay, and we're not looking for a tree form. We do want it to be a shrub. A bushier shrub rather than tree.
Right. And so you're going to pick for multiple stems coming from the base. So if those two stems are coming up together, then you probably only want one of those.
Okay.
A branch. So say I'd like to have branches all the way across. If this was a metronome, I'd like to have branches all the way across the arc here. And so don't accept those that come up where you don't want them. It's kind of the way that you prune it to get it started. And once you've got those in the places where you want them, then you can start nipping the tips back when they're just growing in the early spring or before they bud out. But it's a trial to get a smoke bush to do what you want it to do, just because they
Okay, so if a branch is coming up where I don't want it, take it all the way down.
Yeah, take it off, and preferably when it is still green, so that you're not leaving a bark collar on there.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
I like smoke bushes, but what's the plant on the screen that looks like maple leaves? Yeah, it got pulled out 3 times at a client's garden when I put in. This is Japanese wax bell, Kirangeshima palmata. And it does look like an oak, and I put it into a client's garden because she has a shady, rich, moist soil. Doesn't have to be wet, but it has to be irrigated. So we can't grow it here. And I put it in for her, and it came up, and she pulled it out thinking it was a maple tree. And I rescued it from the compost and put it back in, and she pulled it out again. And the third time she almost pulled it out, and I said, leave it there, because they take a while to get going. They can get, when they were probably pretty close to 5 feet tall in the best garden that we had them. They don't bloom until September. these buds that you see forming right now, because this picture came last week from the garden tour that we offered to our webinar subscribers in one of the subscribers' gardens. And these buds that you see are going to enlarge, and then they will be down facing yellow, big yellow bells. It's quite the pretty plant. It's got actually it looks a little like a grapevine leaf too. It's got grapevine coming up in it. We got anything going there, Steve?
Yeah, Elizabeth is saying redbud was great last year. This year, the leaf edges are yellowing. Some leaf tips are rust colored, some bare twigs at the top. What's the matter? Does it need anything? First thing, look at the roots.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but
there are. I was
repetitive.
I was mentioning this in the warm-up session that there are a lot of stressed trees this year. A lot of stressed trees. A lot of fungus problems, a lot of plants that I think just plain overgrew the nutrient availability in the soil because they're going chlorotic now, taking nutrients, taking nitrogen out of older leaves and moving it to younger leaves. My guess would be that it has to do with the year and shouldn't be a problem. But if it's that's Elizabeth, then probably that redbud came as a little stick, so the roots are probably okay. But Steve's right, check the roots too, especially if it's the tip growth that's dying back.
Yep. Diane has a magnolia Jane that is about 4 foot tall and planted last year. It has been covered with mildew all year, and I am constantly applying neem. Is this the nature of the plant or the dampness of the weather?
I've seen some really nice Jane magnolias. I don't think that they're all that prone to mildew, but there's mildew everywhere. As we were saying last week, we've got mildew on a clematis that's never had mildew on it before, on bells of Ireland where we've never seen it before. In by contrast, our phloxes are looking wonderful, but it has been a year for fungus infections. I see chlorosis here on the lobelia too. Yeah, Steve.
And you have to remember that it's only a preventative. If it's already there and you're applying something, you're not.
True, need the oil or fungicide, either one, and oil acts as a fungicide on many plants because it prevents the fungus spores from being able to attach themselves to the leaf. You can prevent new infection, especially coat the new leaves, but it's not going to take away the mildew that is already sporulated and shown white on the leaves that are infected. And mildew isn't going to kill a plant. Did you say that it was new? This Jane, there was something
4 foot tall, planted last year.
Yeah, I give it a chance to get established before you judge it, because I've seen beautiful Jane magnolias. I think you're more likely to, once it gets a good root system on it and well established, that you probably won't see this that much. Although with changing climate, weather, who knows? Who knows what we're really getting into?
Yeah. Ruth says University of Massachusetts Amherst does routine soil tests that include lead.
Different universities do have different arrangements with labs to do things. A lot of them have done as Michigan State did, where they've contracted out the actual lab work. With Michigan State, I can, and I have on a number of occasions, request the soil test cost covers the standard nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, pH, and cation exchange. If I want to test for lead, or if I want to test for soluble salts, there's quite a long list that comes, that it's there with the soil test that you can check off other things, but it's not routine.
Dave is saying this is a tough year for crabapple scab and other things that make the leaves look funny. Anything I can do to help the trees next year?
You can water and fertilize in the springtime if the soil isn't moist. What we can do to help the crab apples is get their leaves up and mature quicker. This year and many years, the leaf is not mature. It hasn't formed a solid cuticle covering the leaf, and that it's open for infection the whole time that it's gradually opening. So the quicker we can get them to maturity, the better. There is some evidence that fertilizing in the spring with water at the same time can help speed that up. I don't know that I've seen that in action, but I have seen, Steve and I have both seen where a neighbor at our old house, after 20 some years of watching the crabapple trees become bare by August each year with apple scab. They were radiant crab apples, quite susceptible to that. New neighbor moved in and he was very concerned with the lawn. He watered, he fertilized, and the former residents had never done that before. And in the second year after he got there, Steve and I both looked at the trees and realized they're not losing their leaves anymore. So water and fertilizer. And this year, the cool weather, we couldn't do anything to change that.
Yeah, Lori is going back to soil tests. Do you need to do more than one area for a soil test in your yard, or will one be good enough to do the whole yard? We did different beds sometimes, and sometimes we'll go into different beds and collect all the soil and just get a general, and then mix it and get a general take. But I guess that's up to you.
Yeah, for most people with standard suburban or urban lots, one soil test will give you an idea what you've got, but you might have, you would know because you've been digging, is there a difference in the color and the texture of your soil in the front? In the front, is it slipperier and more clay, sticky? In the back, is it more sandy? Then do 2 soil tests. If you're if you know that you're on a filled lot where you dig down and you get different layers of soil, make sure you're testing just the top layer, and you might want to test your back and front yard separately. We tested for Burdette, Steve, remember, on her farm. She had 30 acres, I think, and we could see on the soil survey that there were bands of different soil running through the property. So we tested for the soil in the area where she was going to be growing her herbs and dried flowers. Rather than testing in near the house, we tested out in the field. So yes, you might need to do separate tests, multiple tests, but if your soil looks homogeneous across the front and the backyard, just do one soil test.
Yeah. Nancy has a hand up.
Okay,
Go
Nancy.
ahead, Nancy.
Sorry to be back so soon, but your wax bell photo triggered something here. On the north side of our house, we have the Japanese wax bell and Solomon seal, both of which are looking chlorotic. So we have a lot of water on that side. I'm wondering if nutrients are getting washed out of the soil. David is wondering if the climbing hydrangea on the wall is taking up too much water.
Could be a little of everything going on. As I was saying, with the chlorosis on the leaves, even of the Lobelia syphilitica here in this picture, I think a lot of plants have run out of in the spring. There tends to be a rush of nitrogen as the soil warms up, and all of the debris that was deposited on the soil in the fall and through the winter time is eaten, is digested by the soil microbes. The nitrogen starts becoming available, and at some point that runs out, and it tends to be a natural trigger, one of the natural triggers for plants to say it's the end of the year, you can start closing up your buds, you can stop growing new stuff. I think it came early this year. I wouldn't worry too much about it with the perennials, with the climbing hydrangea. It is a big plant, but you keep yours cut back, I think. So
Yes, we do.
yeah, and plants can only take up as much water as leaves that they have, because it's the leaves that break the water down into hydrogen and oxygen, and that creates a vacuum that pulls more water up. So if you keep it cut small, you're not going to have a huge problem with the roots competing with other plants.
Okay, so at this point, should we just kind of let the other things go, and then in the fall, enrich with our shredded leaves?
Yep. Just I'll make sure there's a good amount of organic matter on there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, speaking of which, Steve, I've noticed that the stuff in the backyard, and especially things that are close to the house, are more chlorotic than things out in the front, where I put 6 inches of leaves on everything and there's still a leaf litter out there. So that could bear up the idea that they're just they're kind of starving.
Okay.
Should we
There's
go
a
on?
question here from Joyce. I have 2 slope gardens that are a challenge. One, 60-degree slope, partial sun. What plants would be good for this area? Has mulch, some shrubs, some landscape rocks
That's
to a
that's really hard for anyone to say
anybody.
without actually looking at it. There's soil,
Yep.
type, wind, how fast the water runs down the side. Anytime we've worked on a serious slope like that, we've terraced it, even if it's a temporary terrace where I think it was the Illinois Department of Natural Resources had a really good bulletin showing how you could use logs temporarily and stake them in place to use them as something to stop the flow of the water down the hill and give plants a chance to start. And eventually the logs or the pieces of wood that you use rot away. But a lot of times on slopes like that, it's not a matter of what you plant, it's how you plant. And we start at the top and work our way down planting, because it could be that daylilies would work very well there, the daylilies that spread and run in runners. It could be that you could use ground covers like some of the mints. And people turn up their noses at mints, but they are good ground covers. Oregano is a wonderful ground cover and it smells really good there. Chocolate mint is a great ground cover. But I'm not looking at the hill, so I can't really tell you.
Yeah, the same with the other slope. It's even steeper and that has grass on it. And she was asking about you answered some of the ground covers that could go. It's a 40 by 15 area. So it's
send us a couple of pictures that show us the hill. And we might be able to tell you something that comes to mind by looking at it. But otherwise, I just think I remember working on Vince's hill, Steve, and how we turned to each other and said, I wonder if we can write off a trip to Tibet to learn how to do this kind of terracing properly. If we can write that off as a business learning experience, because we felt like mountain goats with one leg shorter than the other all day long on that hill.
Yeah. Slopes are not easy to work on and not easy to keep planted and to keep the water from running off, depending on the drainage. And it's hard to just say, I have a slope, what do I put on, and not see it.
I do not have enough pictures here in the front part.
There's
uh-oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay.
Sure.
Did it again, Steve, but I see a hand.
Okay. Then somebody's let's see, Karen has got a lot of the slime mold on pine bark mulch. Is it due to the weather conditions? Do I need to do anything or let it go?
Slime mold is a organism in between a fungus and a bacteria. It's my understanding. It's a mycoplasma-like organism. And when conditions are right, when environmental conditions are right, and there's fuel for it, usually decaying wood, it's going to emerge like a big mushroom. And Therese, your hand is up. Have you gotten to the part in the book Light Eaters about slime mold being able to sense which way to move? It can sense through the outside of the slime section. It can sense where there are nutrients available, and it'll actually slosh to that way. But I don't think there's anything that you need to do with it. You just you can break it up if you want to break up the slime mold. I've seen it a couple of times where the slime mold expands itself. This for those who aren't looking at it, and I certainly don't have a picture of it in here today. Most people say a dog threw up in my garden.
Yeah, that's what she called it in the chat. I didn't read the whole precise question.
But it comes to the surface and it expands. It can expand to quite a large area. If it expands on top of something like sweet alyssum or some other low plant, it can smother it. But for the most part, it's not causing any problems. It's just decaying things. And if you don't like the looks of it, just break it up. It will eventually dry up on its own. But otherwise, it doesn't hurt anything. There was a time, I might have been 30 years ago now, it made the national news because slime mold was very heavy in some portion of Texas on a slow news day. And some of the slime mold was at the base of utility poles and appeared to be climbing up the poles. And they were talking about it as being the alien attacking the network. Okay, anyway.
So that's why Texas is on its own system for electricity. Therese has a hand up.
Go ahead, Therese. I'm looking at Therese's garden here. Therese's garden.
Thanks. I had just two quick questions, if I may. So I love butterfly bush
And I'm wondering, as I deadhead the dead blooms, then, you know, it has the two little side shoots. And as I cut those off, then little tinier ones and so on. I'm wondering, when I take that first larger one off, if I were to cut off the next two little ones, would another larger one grow, or do they just keep getting smaller?
The further back you cut and ask for new growth to come on the plant, the further you cut back into a bigger stem, the bigger the resulting stem is going to be. So if you cut further up toward the top, you're going to have a smaller stem. I just deadheaded my son's butterfly bush last night, and I took, so there's a butterfly bush flower bloomed out here, and further back along the stem, two others have started. I cut all the way down in between these two. On some of them, because he hadn't deadheaded at all three of those were going brown or nearly brown, and I went way back down here and cut. It does grow back up again, and on the best butterfly bushes, the next flowers are not necessarily smaller.
Okay, great, thank you. And my other question is, as I was trying to get my garden ready for all of this, I was digging things out with a pitchfork rather than a shovel. And I found that to be kinder and gentler to the roots.
It can be,
yeah. But I skewered one of my bulbs. No, my bulbs.
Bulbs, yeah.
And it was one that kind of looked like a garlic. It's probably an allium, a big, like, you know, one of those. And all the little pieces fell apart. So will all of those little pieces, can I plant them, or did I wreck it?
You just scale the bulb. When you take the scales off, each being a leaf, if it has a piece of that bottom plate, so when I pull the scale off, if it's got a piece of the bottom plate, you've got a small plant. Not big enough to bloom, but you've got a small plant. That's how you make more lilies, how you can make more allium. So no, you haven't killed it, but you're probably going to have a whole lot of little lilies, little alliums coming up.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, you guys.
Yep. Forks, they're kind of divining rods for gardeners. Yeah, Therese has a wonderful garden, and it was very nice of her to open her garden up.
Diane planted two tough stuff mountain hydrangeas last fall. They have grown well and are near full size, but no flowers yet, no buds. So much for reblooming. Any suggestions?
I don't know tough stuff.
I have no clue.
The blues and the pink hydrangeas, the ones that have the genes from Hydrangea macrophylla, the big leaf hydrangea, or Hydrangea serrata, the lace cap hydrangea, those two are not reliably hardy for us in the Midwest. It has to do with them the buds getting killed over the winter or getting killed by a spring frost. There are some, I think Forever and Ever, Forever Blue. There was one of the early ones that blooms twice, and they said it would bloom. We found it in Milwaukee. I go, well, great. I'm glad you found it in Milwaukee. There are sheltered places even in Milwaukee where you can get something to bloom, but it doesn't mean it's going to bloom for us. So send us a picture of the leaf and the plant, and we can maybe tell you if it's one of those, and then you can ship it to a friend on Cape Cod or in Maryland, where you can put them in the parking lot of a drugstore, and they'll bloom wonderfully, but they're not going to bloom wonderfully for us. I see a question about a soil test again, and this one is from Gretchen.
Yeah, Gretchen, when is the best time to have a soil test, and where to test the soil?
Best depends on your criteria. A lot of farms and a lot of gardeners are sending in soil tests in the spring, so there's a bit of a lag on the return results. You can do a soil test anytime. Generally, as I earlier said, the standard test included a test of nitrogen. They don't test for nitrogen because nitrogen is the nutrient that breaks down most readily. Nitrogen is going to be there in each soil each year, and then it's going to break down. So they don't test for that. They just assume that that your organic matter will give you some nitrogen, and the organic matter percentage tells them that, and then they will tell you how much nitrogen to put on in excess of that. So if you do a soil test now, your nitrogen level is going to look low, but the lab at Michigan State's going to, or whoever is evaluating the test, they're going to account for that anyway. So you can do a soil test anytime that you can dig, but be aware that in the springtime, you're going to be backed up with other people.
All right. Lori is asking, we are seeing more white lily pads near our shoreline this year. A few people suggested I remove it immediately as it will spread fast and is not good to have. It's a native. What are your thoughts on this? If you take out those lily pads and you have a fertilizer going into your lake, what's gonna use up some of that fertilizer? Green.
Okay.
Yes, they'll spread. You just check the spread a little bit. You don't kill them all.
Yeah,
I'm tired of lakes killing every weed, and then they get an algae bloom, and then they put algicide in the lake. Oh, never mind. Sorry.
we get Steve started. Me too. The pond gardening 101 says that in order to keep your algae down in your pond and keep your water clear, cover 1/3 of the surface with plants. Lily pads, floating plants, so that something is absorbing the light and using the nutrients that the fish and the other living things in the water are putting into it. On a lot of our lakes, there's nothing on the surface because everybody keeps clearing everything off. So putting something there is good. Yes, water lilies do spread. They have a running root underground. I've walked on it a couple of times and said, wow, it's really big. It's like irises. But if they get too carried away, then they can be dug out. But I don't find them to be a problem. And I love the fact that frogs and fish can hide under them, and they increase the diversity and entertainment value at the side of the water. Okay, I'm going to go here to something.
Lori just said she just saw some weird looking algae blooms in one part. Comments are very on point. Thank you.
Yeah.
I get emotional about some things.
Yes, he does, and deservedly so. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. I wanted to make the point that this is big butterfly season. This is the time of year when you should see butterflies in your garden, because the big ones, the yellow swallowtails, the monarchs, the black swallowtails, even some of the big moths are out. And I have been enjoying greatly this week the fact that more and more people are in the know. 35 years ago, when we were bringing in caterpillars and our kids were just in first grade, second grade, people would look at you like you're crazy if you weren't saying, I have to go out and look for some milkweed for my caterpillars. But now I'll say, okay, I've got this caterpillar. This is Judge Judy. Judge John is in chrysalis here already. Judge Judy has been poking around and ran out of the first branch of milkweed that I gave her. And I brought her a branch of milkweed from Deb's garden because I didn't have any left in mine. And Judge Judy wouldn't eat it. So I brought her milkweed from the field and she wouldn't eat it. Brought her a piece of milkweed from someplace else. And I was complaining about that to someone during the garden tour. And she said, well, at least you can find milkweed. And this caterpillar, who's he'll have one more shed of his skin, and then he will go into chrysalis too. She'll get to where she's eating a leaf a day. And so would Gail's moth. Gail said, I found 2 Cecropia moth caterpillars and raised them. She said, they each ate 3 great big maple leaves a day. She said it was like running to the grocery store to keep them in food. But the Cecropia moths are great. They're great big ones with the eye spots. They're just beautiful things. What did that naturalist tell us down in Columbus? That there is a great resemblance between these eye spots and this configuration here and the face of a fox that is a scare tactic for birds. And you can talk to people about things like Mary Ellen found these things on a verbena leaf, a vervain, hoary vervain leaf. And she said, what would this be? I said, oh, wow. I don't know what hosts on hoary vervain. And we came up with, it could be a Theona checker spot. because it says the eggs are cream colored, clustered on, well, not Indian paintbrush, not Cenizo, but vervain could be. Maybe we can hatch them out and see what happens. We did check though with Brenda Sattler, Brenda Zedek, who wrote the butterfly gardening books and has talked with us here. She said, no, she said, they were reported in Missouri. We saw that on the butterflyandmoths.org map. They were reported in Missouri at some point in the past, but never were reported in the Great Lakes. So maybe Mary Ellen will hatch these things out. Now that's something that people never used to do. I'm going to hatch out some insects. I think that's a great statement about where gardeners are at. Peggy was out poking around in the flowers that she's got in planters on her deck and saw something that she thought was a mushroom. You can maybe see it in there and realize that a squirrel had planted a croissant into her garden. Oh, croissant. I wonder if it was going to come back for it later. Like, I've had enough already from the donut shop. Okay, you got anything, Laura?
Barbara is asking, could jumping worms be responsible for some of the plant corrosives since they're so efficient at breaking down leaf litter?
Sure. Anything that speeds the release of nitrogen is going to feed into that problem. But that would take a heck of a lot of study. And one soil scientist told me one time, I can tell you what happens when you add a drop of something to a liquid that is a pH, whatever. But in the soil, all bets are off. Every teaspoon of soil has a billion, not exaggerating, organisms living in it if it's alive, and they are all interacting with each other in ways that you can't really predict. So it could be doing it. I haven't seen quite as many jumping worms around here as I did in last year, but they are around. They've been around for a while, that's for sure.
Yeah. Gretchen is asking, are the not common milkweed plants, the swamp milkweed and the field butterfly weed, good for food for monarchs? Yes, they are. But if you find an egg on common milkweed, don't try to put it on the other.
Right.
Don't try to switch their food once they start eating one of them.
Yeah, once they start eating one of the foods, it's as if mom put me here, this is what I have to eat. We had an incident with the field milkweed and swamp milkweed at our old house. We had plenty of swamp milkweed, and I was not finding eggs on it, not finding eggs on it, not finding eggs on it. And after about 3 years, I said, okay, let's put in the common milkweed. I put in one stalk of common milkweed from a friend's place in the spring. And that year, on the swamp milkweed were eggs. Now, why? I don't know. But I decided I'm not going to put up with the common milkweed because it runs around so much. So I went to dig it up in the fall. So it's been in one growing season. And I started tracing roots because the roots spread out in all direction, white roots. It had 100 feet of runner root. They went out like spokes in about all directions. My friend Debbie helped me dig it up, and we just were astounded by how far it could spread. We never did get rid of it because we broke off a couple pieces of those roots, and we had to keep chasing those for years and years and years. So for the gardener, you're probably better with the orange milkweed and the swamp milkweed. But for the butterflies, they seem to prefer the common milkweed. And maybe they're right, because that you get bigger clusters of that in many places.
Well, you look at the leaf looks thicker and juicier and tastier to me, the common milkweed, compared to the other ones. The other leaves seem skimpy and small.
And it might also be the amount of the alkaloids that are in the leaf, because the eating the milkweed causes these caterpillars to sicken a bird that eats them. So a bird learns not to eat a caterpillar that looks like a monarch. And there may be more alkaloids in the common milkweed than in swamp milkweed and in butterfly weed. Did you read in the paper today, you guys? Well, paper, like anybody reads a paper anymore, that in Australia where those same cane toads that are in Florida, a very poisonous toad, like don't let your dog get one in its mouth because it can actually kill them. They're so poisonous. They've been killing off crocodiles who eat the cane toads. So scientists have decided that the way to deal with this is to catch cane toads, cut them in half, discard the top half, which is most poisonous, and put a chemical into the rest of the body of the cane toad that makes crocodiles nauseous and feed those to crocodiles, teaching them not to like the taste of cane toads, and it appears to be working. I think that's quite the process. But they were having hundreds of crocodiles dying out by the hundreds because these toads are so poisonous. They brought the toads in from Hawaii initially, hoping that the toads would eat the beetles that were on their sugarcane crops. And they didn't. They just bred and spread and are causing problems with snakes and other things that eat toads.
Donna says she reads the paper.
Okay.
Mary says in her garden, which has common milkweed and butterfly weed, the monarchs prefer the butterfly weed.
I'll be darned. That's
Yep.
pretty cool.
And Gretchen said, I did something awful the other day when I was asked to remove the common milkweed from my garden area. So I cut them off, and now I assume I have destroyed a lot of pending monarchs. Should I just pull all the common milkweeds early in the season so I'm not asked to murder bugs?
If you cut them off before the monarchs arrive early in the year, you can be pretty sure that you're not getting any eggs on there. If you cut them off later, you can actually do a visual inspection and see if there's any in there. Linda, what's your last name? She's in the Troy Garden Club, I understand, has raised 400 monarchs this year already. So there are people that might adopt your monarchs if you don't want to bring them up yourself. But there's not much you can do about that. Every time that we remove a plant, we're removing a little bit of the ecosystem. I keep hitting my mouse. Sorry, guys. I want to boast a little bit about some children that helped us at the Waterford Library. Show a year for having been cut back when we could hardly bear to cut it. At the Waterford Library in June, we planted annuals, garden heliotrope, ageratum, angelonia. And some of the volunteers said, well, are you sure we should put them so far apart? I said, yeah, put them so far. We have lots of perennials in the garden, and those perennials can carry the show until the annuals come in with really our second half show. And there they are now, filling in almost to the edges. And the heliotrope and angelonia, which had a terrible time because the sprinkler didn't work in that bed at first and they fried, are now fully in. And we deadheaded them when they were like this. People said, oh, they only have a few flowers. So take the flowers off, let them grow leaves, let them fill in. And now they are the star of the show because now the liatris is done, the iris is growing back, the peony is done blooming, and now it's time for the annual show. There's still about 8 weeks, at least 8 weeks of color from these, and we should be taking advantage of it. So June, the petunias went in. We don't put in our annuals at the Waterford Library until for sure after the last frost, and because we work on the second Wednesday of the month, it's sometimes the middle of June, and that's okay. We've got lots of perennials. This is now in July, and in July, I made the volunteers cut back the longest branches. I said, no, pick up the branches, a lot of seed pods on there, pick up the branch and cut at least 3 of those branches all the way back to good leaf. And look at it now. Now it's carrying the show. Now is when we really need the animals. The dill was up and blooming, and yes, it's wonderful, and we've got black swallowtail caterpillars on it, but those that are going to seed needed to be cut out. And it's much, much nicer looking when you can take out and leave just fresh flowers. And to help us this time at the Waterford Library, we had a couple of Girl Scouts. This is Maylin, and they learned from us and from each other the names of plants and why we were deadheading and where to cut. We paired them up with somebody that's Peyton in the background and Bree in the foreground. And they helped us deadhead the whole garden, even pulled a few weeds, then went inside because our garden is at the library and we like people to learn from it. We put out signs with interesting facts about the plants. And the girls helped us make signs and put them in the holders and put them out in the garden. It's great to get the perspective from someone who's not necessarily not a gardener, not an adult. We did a lot of research on the plants. We had books, we talked, we had facts already written down. And for each plant, we read through the facts that we had, trying to pick one thing, one tip or fact or curiosity that we could write on the sign. And for instance, on right now, Peyton is putting in a sign right by the Brunnera that says Brunnera, Jack Frost, has hairy leaves. That was the thing that most amused them, that it has hairy leaves. On the hosta, what most amused them is that hosta used to be called funkia. And here we are beating ourselves up trying to find the most interesting fact when the little facts make all the difference to people. They were very happy with that. Snapdragons that you can open and close the mouth. You know how kids like that. And we put them on their ears as earrings. But if you've got cleome that are looking like this with the seed pods adding up here, flip those back. Clip those back and keep the show going, because we've got all the rest of August, all of September, part of October for these things to carry on. So the lavender looked good earlier in the year. It's purple and beginning to lay over in June and July here. And now in August, it's rather gray looking. And when we take it off, we have fresh looking plants again. And we get to see the annuals a little bit better. And we did a lot of cutting back. I showed you cutting back Amsonia in our own garden. I cut back the Amsonia in July. This was in July before we started. And this is now in August. We couldn't even see our wattle before, let alone see the sign that was in there. And we showed you cutting back Coreopsis in our last newsletter. That, okay, it's done. It doesn't look good anymore. Cut it back. And we cut it all the way back. One of the plants all the way back to the new growth coming in. Just thought we'd let you know that there they are now. Blooming again, all fresh foliage, and keep your eye on the daisies back there. It's a very nice daisy. But it's just about done blooming in that picture. And when it had only about 10 white flowers remaining on it, I said, you can cut it all the way down. All the way down, he said? I said, yes, you can cut it all the way down. So with head shears, he's cut it all the way down. And you can see the new growth was already coming on the outside, youngest parts on the edge. Now that there's light coming into the middle, it'll fill in there too. In 2 weeks' time, it'll be all green and it might bloom a little bit again. We cut tickweed, tick seed back all the way if it is flopped, and that particular plant that we cut all the way back, it really didn't have any salvageable stems that could have done justice for the looks of the plant. So we cut it all the way back. But if you're cutting it back as you go along, you can usually cut it back just part way down the stem and just keep it coming from further up. This, I think this is Supercell's garden too, with the blue lobelia in it, and the hostas and the bloodroot.
Yes.
And the bloodroot. Okay.
Just a hint of that tree sculpture we got from Marge way back.
Oh, the wood. Okay, I do see the wood.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's still hanging in.
Looks like a tigridia, which I would think is an annual.
Well, was that Sue's garden?
Yep. Anybody's guess. So many cool plants.
Oh, you already answered cut tickweed all the way back. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to go back and continue on here. While you're cutting things back, think about this. Think about this one. Stick it is what you do with a cutting. You stick it into soil. You can root cuttings in water, but you can stick them into moist soil and keep them moist. Brugmansia and hibiscus both had a role in this week's email. Mary Ellen, in the spring, cut back the Brugmansia she'd overwintered. And just for the heck of it, she took the tips and she stuck them in, and they are now sizable little plants. She says she'll overwinter them, and she has some extra ones if somebody's interested. Mary Ellen Turner, if you're interested, send us an email. We'll put you in contact with Mary Ellen, and maybe she can find a home for these because they're quite pretty. The big flowers that hang down. I've seen Brugmansias 7-8 feet tall. But
Yeah.
she wanted hers to be shorter, so she was cutting the top off, and she just stuck the cutting. She stuck them into moist pots, and within 2 weeks they started to root. Well, 3 weeks ago, we were at one of our neighbors' gardens with our neighborhood gardening group walking around, and we were at her hibiscus, which right now looks like this. It was just coming up with buds, and I reached in and cut some stems back. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm cutting some of the stems back so that they'll bloom later than others." So this stem, the top of this stem has, can you see white decaying petals, brown decaying petals, brown decaying petals. It's been blooming for about a week. The end of this stem, its cluster of buds is just beginning to open its first flower. And that's one of the branches that was stalled. See, if you look on the inside of this cluster, you'll see the cut where I cut the tip off. And what's this got to do with anything? It's got to do with one of the neighbors picked up the branch that I cut off and took it home and stuck it in the ground outside at the base of his cucumber cage, right there. And he called me the other day. He said, "What should I do with this? It's growing. See it? See the new growth coming?" So he stuck it into the ground firmly enough that some of the nodes, this is a node where a branch was growing and where a leaf can grow. Some of the nodes were buried, and he keeps that area watered because his vegetables are there. And the cucumber, which has grown over it now to where we had to lift up the cucumber to see where it was. The cucumber over it has shaded it a little bit and kept it alive from the hot sun. So what does he have? He has another hibiscus coming. I think that's a pretty good deal. He's a natural gardener. He has so far the biggest of the giant pumpkin contest pumpkins going. That one is probably about as big as one of those medicine balls. As he says, it's orange, so probably is not going to get too much bigger. Ruth is sticking cuttings from angel wing begonias. Begonias are great.
Yeah, they root easy.
Yeah, you can stick a leaf of a begonia and they take it. And there are so many cool begonias, so many cool kinds of begonias. I have to tell you about yews because I was at a friend's house.
Not there. You got to click on the number.
We don't think about yew predators, these particular ones, but two of them came to light this week. Teresa, not Therese, asked about her morning glory vine. She said, "Is it okay if it climbs on my yew?" There's her morning glory vine, and it's come over and grabbed the yew. I said, "Well, just a little bit of a vine climbing on a shrub is okay. People grow clematis on shrubs all the time. They put the late blooming clematis and you cut them all the way to the ground and let them scramble up the bush after the bush is done." So that's not probably going to hurt it any. She said, "Well, what about this one?" I said, "Okay. Now, when you cut off all of the light to a plant, you're going to take the chance. You're going to take the chance that you're going to kill something. Plus, those big leaves and that thickness in the heat of summer could hold in a lot of heat and cook some of the new tips that are still soft on that yew." I said, "I would take some of that off of there. Morning glory, kudzu, they can cover things right over. Or let it bloom and then peel it back off of there." And why is it coming out on the yews? Well, because
Where's the sun?
morning glory is going for the sun. And for your oldest child too. I mean, somebody's under there. No, don't let too much of a vine grow. If you're going to grow a vine on something, like I say, the late blooming clematis that you can cut all the way to the ground and they'll still bloom. They'll scramble up 5-6 feet in the year and poke up through and bloom. Wild cucumber vine, it's an annual native vine. Never tends to get too thick. It just kind of hangs here and there. Here it's on a smoke bush. And those can be a nice plant to put out there. Another predator of yews is deer. People are always concerned about deer. Do the deer eat your yews? This is in Diana's yard. And Diana has deer all the time in the yard. And the deer have eaten the yews as far up as they can reach. But yews are big plants. That's a yew. That's the same kind of yew that people plant in front of their windows in their house and keep cut small all the time. And
look at that bark and the chokers of the trunks. Oh,
isn't it gorgeous? So people have asked us about our yews. So I took the yews that were planted. There were 6 of them planted in front of a window at the front of the house. I dragged them in the back and planted them. It took them a couple of years to take off, but there's one here. There's one here, there's one here, and they're now growing 18 to 24 inches a year. So now they're beginning to take off. And people say, "Well, are the deer eating them?" Well, so far they're not, but if they do start eating them, we're only going to protect them for a little while because we don't care if they eat the bottom part. By the time those grow, the top of them, the part the deer can't reach, is what we need so that we're not looking right into the windows of the neighbor's house. And we love that look on the yews.
yeah.
Anything coming in?
Judith is asking, my potted begonias are looking spent and raggedy. Can I root their cuttings in the garden as they as they are?
Sure, but look for a place that's cool, that's out of the direct sun, because you don't want to fry them.
Yeah.
So you want to put them in a partly sheltered place. A lot of potted plants are looking bad because they've had so much water, and if a pot doesn't drain really well, they've had some rotted roots going on.
Real quick, too, that will happen.
Yeah,
About 4 minutes.
really.
Nothing coming in right now.
Okay, then we'll go back. And greedy roots. I missed this last week. We had it up, but forgot to talk about it. Lori had asked about, what do you do with arborvitae roots? I'm trying to grow things and the arborvitae roots get in there. I was remembering, you remember talking to Pat up at Lavender Lane
Yeah.
Herb Farm. I'm not sure whether Pat is still in the business. There are at least 3 herb lavender farms up in Northport, up north of Traverse City, Maple City. But I'm not sure if Pat is still them, but Pat's whole herb garden, big herb garden, went on and on and on. There's arborvitae hedge behind all of it. And Pat told me I will never, ever plant an arborvitae hedge and try to put a garden in front of it again. And she was, in telling me that, she was echoing what I read in one of the first gardening books that I read. Thalasso's Crusoe used to have a radio show and I think a TV show. And she did some book. I only read her books. Making Things Grow was the name of the book. And in it, she described how terrible the roots of arborvitaes are, how greedy they are, and how English gardeners put flashing, the metal flashing that you use on the roof, so an 18-inch deep metal piece into the ground vertically to keep the roots of the arborvitae from getting into their garden. Knowing how roots grow and knowing how much we want arborvitaes to have a good root system, I'm not willing to do that with a hedge if the hedge is important to me. But I am thinking that authoritative people have said that you really can't grow by an arborvitae hedge. You can, however, keep space between the arborvitae and the plants. So I don't know what to tell you, Lori, about your plants that you have been sinking in pots. Keep putting them in pots and then change them every year. We had the problem underneath Norway maples, which also have a fibrous root system that forms each year. And most of those roots are annual roots. They're not the flare roots. They're roots that form to take advantage of nutrients that are there. And if the nutrients in the water run out, they can be shed and other ones can be grown. So you can take them out for all you want. They're going to be back again the next year. So we would grow underneath the Norway maple in our raised containers that we made out of PVC that we just sliced. So we had a cylinder, a bottomless cylinder. We'd set the bottomless cylinder down, fill the soil, plant in it. You can plant all kinds of things in there, including perennials, because it's in contact with the ground and it's PVC. So you can leave it out in the wintertime. And about every 2 years, we have to knock the PVC over, cut off where all the roots of the trees have grown up into it, and replace the soil. But it's better than not being able to grow anything at all. Let's see, that's well.
Suzanne uses a saw to make space under her arborvitaes.
A saw. Oh, she's sawing roots. Okay.
1 minute.
Okay, I want to leave you with, we showed you a while back in one of our webinars how to visualize the garden. And I wanted to crow a little bit about this. We showed you this area at our neighbors that we decided to, they asked us to plant and we decided to plant. And when you put the plants out and they're little, and they're 4-inch pots, they don't look like much. So we did a progression for the neighbor to say that we're going to have as a showpiece, there'll be a hydrangea in the middle. And we're going to surround that. We're going to frame it with yellow plants, a Chardonnay Bells Deutzia, a candy corn spirea, and a yellow orange blooming Heliopsis, and yellow coral bells. And then we'll frame those with purple or red violets, great little gray pet daylily, a Mercury rising coreopsis, and over on the far side there's milkweed. And then we added more purple and black, back in black, sedum, and some blue hostas. Thank you, Nancy and David, in the background. So that was all made, that was all photoshopped in. He said, here's what we're looking to see. This spring, you could begin to see it. This was the end of June. And there's the candy corn spirea and the Chardonnay bells and the hosta. The purple of black and back in black.
A hydrangea, not hosta.
Oh, right, hydrangea. Thank you, Stephen. But now, right now, you can see it. So there's the hydrangea, there's the Chardonnay bells, the coral bells, the heliopsis, the spirea. So you really can, if you give things room to bloom, room to grow, and plan them out, you really can actually create a picture. But you do need to wait. This is the 4th year for this clematis, Mrs. Robert Bryden, before it actually did what I've seen it do and made me go and buy one. First couple of years, I was very disappointed. I said, you better start working on this. Last year, it looked okay. This year, it looks like what I expected to look like.
Yep.
And that reminded me when somebody emailed and said, I've gone on vacation, I came back and everything is overgrown, everything is weedy, I don't know where to start. Start wherever you see the spot the most. If it's out your kitchen window, if it's out your family room window, if it's where you come up the driveway, start in a place where you can see and get feedback, give yourself feedback right away. That's what you want to do more than anything else.
Yep. Okay, it's
Time to go, huh?
time. Yes, indeed.
Yep. Oh, Lori, I love your new gate. I don't think that was there before. That's very pretty. Oops, I'm not supposed to be here. Is this supposed to take me to the end? There we go. So we'll be back next Friday with another Friday, Free for All Friday. Wow, hibiscus are just such a, they look like a kid drew the plant, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Passion flower. In Royal Oak, there was one house that I used to garden at, that the passion flower would come back every year because the foundation of the house kept it warm. This is the Zone 7 plant. So that's all for our 16th Free for All Friday.
Thank you all for being
Next
here.
Friday. Yeah, thank you for coming. And we will see you next time.
Take care, everybody. See you next time.
Good gardening. You're welcome for the garden tour. Those of you who are saying thanks for the garden tour. It was a very, very nice time and great.
We really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Ta-ta.
I know.